welcome to Central Florida. Salute YouTube once again. I'm at the Eagles area, 4273 in Okahumpka, and I have a special guest today. One guy that you gotta meet. There's not too many of you guys around, but his name is James Edward Towns, right? But he go by Ed, right?
Right.
All right. This gentleman, as you can see by his hat, World War II, Korea, and Vietnam, a triple hitter. And I thank you for your service, sir, and it's an honor to have you here on Salute. Could you tell me a little bit? I know you said you're 101?
Yes.
101 years young. You're looking great, I tell you. So where are you from originally?
I was born and raised in Richmond, Virginia.
You went to high school there and...
Went to high school there, and then I went to Virginia Polytechnic Institute as a cadet in the Corps.
So what year was this that we're talking?
1940 to 43.
40 to 43.
I had 3 years there, and the Army came along and told the people who were in the ROTC and the various military colleges around the country that if they would enlist, they would let them stay in school until they graduated, which meant one more year for us. And then we would go to OCS, and then we would be on active duty.
So you said, okay, sign me up, right?
Sign me up. So the next year they changed their mind and they called us all to active duty.
You know, the military's like that, isn't it?
Sometimes. So anyway, I wound up at Fort Meade, Maryland, with people from VMI and the Citadel and Texas A&M and what have you. And they issued us uniforms and all that sort of thing. And we hung around there for several weeks, and they decided we don't have room to send you to OCS. So what we'll do is send you to basic training while you're waiting. So we went to basic training. And after basic training, we got the same story. What are we going to do with you now? So they promoted us all to corporal and sent us back to college right where we left off, and we got an extra semester in before we were sent to OCS. Now, I was in the artillery at VPI, so I went to artillery OCS, and upon graduation, I was assigned to an artillery outfit for about 2 weeks, and then we were all transferred to infantry. So I went to Camp Blanding, Florida. No, I first went to the infantry basic course at Fort Benning, Georgia. And I was there at the same time John Eisenhower was there.
So you were at Camp Landing. What did you do at Camp Landing?
I was a training officer in an infantry training unit company, and I was there about 3 months, and then I was shipped to Italy, where I joined the 10th Mountain Division.
Wow.
And I stayed with them until we got north of Rome, and that's where I got hit when we were attacking. I told you that we were going up a hill, and Germans had a defensive position up there. And this was late in the evening, and it was getting dark, and they could hear us. So they started hosing the area down with MG-42, which is a very potent weapon, better than anything we had. So we hugged the ground all night long because the green traces from that thing were about as high as that table. and we were flat on the ground, and the ground was so hard and rocky we could not dig in, and we didn't want to make any noise by trying because they'd locate us better than they didn't know exactly where we were. They were just hosing the area down. In the morning, when it got light enough, part of the battalion I was in started attacking them from their right flank, our left side. And they killed my platoon sergeant and a couple of other guys in that area. And I could hear the firing, but I couldn't tell exactly where it was coming from. So I stood up to try to find out, and when I did, I caught around here. I had a rifle in my hand. Fortunately, I think it ricocheted off the rifle instead of going into me.
Mm.
Anyway, then I spent a while in the hospital in Leghorn, and they shipped me back to Naples to go back to the States. Well, while I was in Leghorn, the fellow in the bed next to me was Danny Inouye, who later became a senator from Hawaii.
Oh.
And Danny had lost his arm, had been shot off. And while we were there, 4 people from his company came to see him, and it was cold. They had on their overcoats, and they looked like they were stuffed. So they got around Danny's bed, opened their overcoats, and took out bottles of wine and started sticking them under his mattress.
And you knew you had the right roommate then,
I
right?
had the right roommate then, boy, and we very carefully took care of those so they wouldn't find them.
Yeah.
And the empty bottles, we put them out in the hall. I don't know. Anyway, Danny and I came back to the States on the same ship, and we hitchhiked from Norfolk up to Richmond, and Danny went on up to Washington, where he had some relatives. Anyway, I tried to visit Danny once he got elected to Congress, and then he went from the House to the Senate, but he was so busy I never did get to see him.
Yeah.
Anyhow, I went back to VPI and graduated, and then I went into the regular Army because I had what they were looking for at the time. And they sent me to Arkansas to can't think of the name of it now, of a training center right there, and I went in there as a company commander.
Now, what year are we looking at now?
We're
We still
looking
in World
at
War II?
1950.
1950.
Right. So from there I went to Okinawa,
Mm-hmm.
and I was on Okinawa for about 3 months, March, April, May, June, about 4 months before the war started in Korea. Well, on Okinawa, we were at 2/3 strength because the Secretary of the Army at that time decided he was going to cut all the fat out of the combat arms and just leave the muscle. So we could not go to Korea until we were brought up to strength. 3 weeks later, a ship came in with all these replacements, and I was on a battalion staff at that time as the S4, and I went down and picked them all up, brought them back up, and they were assigned to the companies. Took them down to the quartermaster depot, got their field equipment. The companies already had their rifles and machine guns and what have you. So everybody was armed properly. The next morning we went down and got on the ship to go to Korea. The ship they sent for us was an old Japanese hospital ship. And it was a rusty old thing. So we had 2 destroyers escorting us to Korea. I was standing at the railing of the ship, and the sea was like a lake, hardly any waves at all. And all of a sudden, the sirens went off on those two escort ships, and they started circling around us as fast as they could, dropping depth charges. We never saw any sign of anything that they may have killed there. We saw no submarines or anything. But
Did you see an explosion, the water coming up or anything? Or?
From the depth charges.
Yeah.
Yeah, oh sure. While I was there, a real tall, good-looking staff sergeant came over to see me with his M1 rifle in his hand. And he said, "Sir, I've been on recruiting duty for the last few years, and I've never been issued this weapon. I don't know how it operates.
Oh, my goodness.
And here we're going to war."
Yeah, it's about time you learn, right?
He said, "Would you show me how it operates, how to disassemble it and reassemble it and what have you?" So I spent about an hour with him, and then I went to the battalion commander and I said, "Sir, 1/3 of our strength joined us the day before we left Okinawa. I think we've got a problem. We don't know who is experienced with these weapons, who's capable of doing whatever they're supposed to do. We got to find out." And this sergeant told me that, he said, "I'm now squad leader. I don't know anybody in my squad. I've never trained with them for a day, and I don't know how my rifle works properly.
Wow.
And we're going to war." I didn't tell him, but I thought to myself, we're in a hell of a situation here.
I would say so.
Well, anyway, when we checked these replacements, we found out machine gunners who had the MOS then had fired a machine gun for familiarization. They never heard a shot fired in anger. Never been in the field in combat.
No experience.
Same way with mortars. We couldn't shoot mortars from the ship because of the base plate. So we asked the destroyers to back off. So the riflemen and the automatic riflemen and the machine gunners and what have you could fire, at least get that much done.
Yeah.
So they did, and we did. Well, when we landed in Pusan, they had no equipment there to unload the ship, so we had to unload ammo, rations, everything by hand. And it was very hot, but we did it in about 3 days. Then they sent us off. Oh, first I asked one of the colonels there, I said, "What is our mission here?" He said, "Hold or die." Anyway, we were sent off to a village nearby to shake down and get the ammo distributed to the troops and what have you, and sea rations, because that's all we had. We didn't have any fresh water. All the Korean villages around there had nice wells, and that's where they got their drinking water. They got everything from that well. We were searching for water. We went to the villages, and the fifth column from the North Koreans knew they was going to come, and they had shot a half a dozen people in each village and dumped their bodies in the well.
Oh, boy.
So that made fresh water kind of scarce.
Yeah.
But we did have halazone tablets, and we got water where we could from streams. Used the halazone tablets, so we'd have, and then we had not fresh, but canned fruit juice in the sea rations. So I lived on sea rations and pork and beans for about 3 months. Anyway, we got our orders to go to the west coast to a little town called Hadong, Hadong. because there were two MSR, main supply routes, coming from North Korea, coming down through Seoul, and then one came down the east side and one came down the west side. We were sent to Haedong, which was a road junction, and you'd go from Haedong directly east to Busan. We had no intelligence whatsoever. We were told to set up a defensive position there and block North Koreans' movement down that main supply route. The North Koreans had good intelligence. They knew we were coming. We knew nothing. They attached an artillery battery to us when we went over there. We left with 912 men. I knew exactly, and I still have the records at home, because I had to issue the rations and the ammo and all that as the S4 supply officer. We had an air-ground operations team from the Air Force assigned to us, but they told me, we have no radio communications with any Air Force element, and we cannot give you any air support. But we will go. Maybe we will later, but right now, that's our situation. I said, okay, go, and I issued them ammo, and they had 45s and C rations. The artillery battery had joined us, and next day off we had Haedong. 6 North Korean divisions knew we was coming. They set up a big ambush, and we just walked right into it. The next day, we had 312 left out of the 900 and some we started with. That was all.
Wow.
A few made their way down to the coast, which was pretty close by, and some Korean fishermen picked them up in a boat and took them around, and they walked back into us in about 3 days. We lost every company commander. We lost a battalion executive officer. And the battalion commander was helping unload a truck with ammo, and he dropped the ammo box on his foot, and he had to be evacuated. So, anyhow, we were then attached to as the organic 3rd Battalion to the 27th Infantry Wolfhound Regiment. They were 1 battalion short. They were shipped in from Japan. The commander was Mike Michaelis. Mike Michaelis had been chief of staff to the, what's the general's name who told the Germans nuts? MacAuliffe. He had been chief of staff to Brigadier General MacAuliffe in the Airborne Division. And he was a hell of a good commander. So we went from there. We got a bunch of replacements, plus some Koreans who'd had 10 days training before they were assigned to us. And I don't know where they got them, but they didn't speak English, and they were a bigger hindrance than they were help. But anyway, we took them. We went to Daegu, and we blocked the North Korean advance. They never took Daegu. Just before that, though, we were issued 3.5-inch rocket launchers, which would kill the tanks that they were using. The rocket launchers that we had prior to that were too light, and they would not kill those tanks.
Yeah.
So once we got the 3.5s, we killed a lot of tanks up there and a lot of North Koreans, but they didn't take Daegu. And then we got more replacements from the States, and we eventually got back to where we would have normally been had we not been ambushed and slaughtered. Anyhow, we were in the perimeter. We stayed there until September, and we were informed that MacArthur was going in at Incheon. this was top secret stuff, but our situation was so desperate they needed anything they could get to help morale. So when he went in, he broke the back of the North Korean supply line, and the guy who really led that thing was a Colonel Puller, and my wife is a Puller. Anyway, he was a Marine colonel, led a Marine regiment, and they were successful. It was an extremely difficult operation. I won't name his name, but a friend of mine was aide-de-camp to MacArthur prior to that time. And the Chief of Staff of the Army, Chief of Naval Operations, whoever was running the Marine Corps, came to Japan to try to talk him out of it because of the tide situation there. It was about a 16-foot difference, and that's something to deal with.
Yeah, I guess so.
So they gave him all the reasons they thought that he should not do that. And he said, after it was all over, MacArthur stood up and he said, "Gentlemen, I'm going ashore in Incheon on the 15th of September. Are you going to have a new commander?" Excuse me. They got up, got on the airplane, flew back to the States. And this turned out to be one of MacArthur's masterpieces. Anyway, once the supply line to the North Koreans in the South was broken, they started pulling back, and that's when we started attacking. And we couldn't hardly keep up with them. We got up to one town, it was a fairly good-sized town, I wish I could remember the name, and we were hunting them. We were hunting any of them from the 6th North Korean Division because we wanted to kill them, and everyone we found we took care of. So there was a brick, and you didn't see many brick houses in Korea, but there was a brick jail. And I had our Korean liaison officer with me. And I went into this jail, and there was the old jailer in there, and he didn't speak English, so I told my liaison officer, who was Korean and spoke good English, ask him what this old prisoner was in here for, because he only had one. He had a beard and what have you. And he said, "What did he do to be put in jail?" And he said, "I don't know, he hadn't confessed yet." Korean justice, I don't know. Anyway, we kept going, and finally we wound up in Pyongyang. And I set up a base camp there so I could keep the battalion supplied with whatever they needed. I had to feed them twice a day, and ammo and evacuation of wounded and whatever they needed. And we got up to within about 20 miles of the Yalu River before we hit any Chinese. And it was like a swarm of ants. They came in. We didn't know they were there until we ran into them. And we killed 4 one night right in their CP. And CP area. And then it was snowing then, and we could look up on the mountains, and they all had on these brown uniforms stuffed with cotton or whatever. They were thick.
Try to keep warm.
Try to keep warm, but they had on tennis shoes, you know? And we could see them on the mountainside, just like ants coming down. And we had two P-51s circle, and we didn't have any communications with them. So we got out in the snow and formed an arrow with bodies just standing in the snow with the arrow pointing to the mountains. And when the P-51s would come over, we would do like this.
Oh, gesture towards the
They
mountain.
got the message, and they did flip their wings, and they started working on that mountain, and they shot up everything they had.
Yeah, I heard that the Chinese were coming in. They'd just come in like ants, like you said.
Yeah.
And not all of them had a weapon, but when one got killed, the other one picked up a weapon, right? Is
Well,
that true?
That's true. I never let them get close enough to me to see that.
I can understand that.
But later on, after we were knocked back south of the Han River, which was a long drive, and we were ordered to attack when Ridgway took over, we found a lot of them who had no weapons, but their job was, they had grenades. The job was to kill one of us and get our weapon and our ammo,
Oh, wow.
you know.
Yeah.
But we discovered that after we went back across the Han River. We were the first battalion to do that. And we captured the whole artillery battery with their guns and their Siberian ponies that pulled them. And we had some cowboys in the battalion. They were riding around on Siberian ponies. But they had a huge ammo stockpile of all kinds as high as this ceiling. And we inherited that. But we were trying to push them so fast that we just left it behind for somebody else coming up later to take care of it. While we were there, we had CP right close by, Battalion CP, in a little house right close by where they had their artillery pieces. And of course, we had a guard around the CP at night, and he heard a noise, and he found a Chinaman underneath the house we were in.
Wow.
He was just hiding. He wasn't a threat or anything. But we got him out and sent him on back. But while we were there, we had a lot of mountain stuff. And I was looking for a new place to put the trucks I had all this ammo in. And I pulled out into an open area, and somebody with an elephant gun saw me. I was in the Jeep, and he got off 2 rounds, but they came so close I could hear him go by. Shoo! We got out of there in time. We didn't get hurt.
What rank were you then at this particular time?
I was a captain at that time. I'd been promoted in the field. I went there as a first lieutenant, and then 30 days, 45 days or so later, they promoted me to captain. Then when the war was over, my battalion was a guard for 8th Army Forward that was in peace talks. And that was nice. But in the meantime, though, I'd contracted hepatitis, and I spent 3 months in the hospital in Japan. And the whole division had over 1,000 people back there with the same problem in Japan with hepatitis. When I got back to the battalion commander had gone, had all new people. I hardly knew anybody. The turnover had been pretty heavy. And out of my battalion, there were only 3, no, there was a warrant officer and the S1 and me. We were the only 3 original officers who made it through the first year to rotate. So we were very fortunate, and I was very lucky because I had a lot of real tight calls. I'll give you one example. When we were being pushed back so quickly from our positions up near the Yalu, I had to move the trains quite a ways back. And my orders were to recontact the combat elements at midnight the next night. So I had 5 trucks with hot food, and we had ammo and some clothing and everything we could stuff in there. And I had about a 25-mile trip to take to get to this place where I was to meet the battalion. The dust on the road was about that deep.
Yeah.
And when we got about 2 miles from our destination, I ran into a line of troops on the road going south. And I thought they were Koreans because they had these padded uniforms on, until I saw their hats with the big red star. They just were walking up the road with their weapons and what have you, and I thought, good God, these look like Chinese. And I wasn't sure until I got to the end of the column, and now these Chinese with these little 2-wheel carts and the heavy machine guns, they were pulling them, and I knew then there was no doubt. So we never slowed down or anything, and they didn't do anything to stop us. So when we got to our destination, there was no one there. But the regiment had dumped all the footlockers and everything that they had been carrying for the officers and whatever. Big pile. We found that. I didn't have a map of the area, and I didn't know where anybody was. I just knew there was nobody there, period. So I found my footlocker, and I found the battalion commander's footlocker and the S3's footlocker, and I couldn't find anybody else's. But the supply people and the cooks from the companies, they found some for their people, and they took them all and loaded them up and what have you. So I got everybody together and said, listen, here's our situation. Those people we passed coming in were Chinese, no doubt. They must have thought we were their own people because they didn't try to stop us or anything. But the situation was so confusing. We didn't know what the hell was going on. I'm sure they didn't know what the hell was going on. They didn't know where anybody was. I said, we're going back since we don't know anything about the road net. We got no maps. We're going back the way we came in. I want everybody locked and loaded. I said they were Chinese. Cover up with blankets. Be ready to shoot if they try to stop us. If your truck is disabled, run it off the road. Don't block the guy behind you. Give him a chance to get out. So that's the way we went out. And we went right back through the same column. But the dust was so bad.
Yeah.
It kicked it up, and you couldn't see hardly anything. So I think they were sure we were their own people because their trucks looked very much like ours, and their Jeeps did too.
Yeah.
So they let us go back through them. But when I got to the front of the column, there was an officer leading it. I could tell because he had red stripes on his pants. He stood out in the front of the road and did this, tried to stop us, And I told my driver, if he doesn't get out of the road, run him over. Nobody's stopping this thing. So right at the last minute, he just stepped aside and we went right on through and nobody fired around.
Oh, wow.
But I froze my feet.
Yeah, I had an uncle. I had an uncle that he got frostbite.
Yeah.
A lot of that in Korea, a lot of people don't know about that. And then, of course, I've heard about the Frozen Chosen
Yeah.
reservoir and the ship that took a lot of people out of there. Korea has a lot of history there.
Oh, yeah.
And you were a big part of it. But so, how long were you in Korea?
Well, I left there in August of 51. I got there in July of 50. So, but 3 months of the time I was in the hospital in Japan.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So your service was continuous, right?
Yeah.
I mean, you didn't after World War II get out and then come back in.
Yeah.
You just
I did.
kept going.
I
And you wound up in Vietnam.
volunteered.
You're an amazing man.
When I went to Germany, from the War College, I'll tell you a story about the War College in a minute. I commanded this brigade. I had 4 battalions, 2 tank battalions and 2 mech infantry battalions, 2 in Munich and 2 in Augsburg. When I came back, I'd been appointed Chief of Staff of the division. And I was at Fort Riley, Kansas. Initially, I had 2 jobs. I came back as Chief of Staff, but I still had command of the brigade, so I really had 2 jobs. And I was busy, believe me.
Oh, yeah.
So after a year there at Fort Riley, Kansas, I volunteered to go to Vietnam because I wanted to get into the fight. And they shipped me promptly.
I don't know if you realize this, Ed, but they were really hoping to get a lot of people over there, and it wasn't something that they had to think about. Once you said, yeah, hey, boom, you're gone.
Well, commanding this brigade in Germany, while I was there, I had to take a task force to Greece for a couple of months for a NATO exercise. And the Air Force flew my whole outfit, not just the task force down there. And that was a very interesting exercise, too. So now we're back in the States. I volunteered to go to Vietnam, and they sent me. And I was supposed to be the senior advisor to the 1st Arvin Corps, which was in the northern part of the country. And at the last minute, they put me on General Abrams' staff, and I was the deputy director for CARDS. I was Civil Operations and Revolutionary Development Support. And I worked for a guy named Manaway. And Manaway had the equivalent rank in the State Department of Major General. And he reported directly to the head of CARDS there, who had 4-star rank. He was civilian in the State Department. His name was Bill Colby, who, when he left there, became director of the CIA.
Wow.
Now, that's another story, but I won't get you involved in that.
So you wound up in Vietnam and
Yeah, well, I toured the country several times with Bill Colby. He was a terrific guy. I liked him. And what happened when I came back? Oh, I went to Fort Polk, Louisiana when I came back as Chief of Staff at Fort Polk. And then they recalled me to Washington to be the Deputy Director of Officer Personnel for the Department of the Army. and I had responsibility for the worldwide assignment of all officers up through the grade of full colonel, journal officers, well, except for doctors, lawyers, and chaplains. I had everybody else. But I had a huge staff, and each section was headed by a full colonel. And I was fortunate to be the senior full colonel, so they all worked for me. I was the deputy director. The director was a general officer. And, when my tour was up there, I had a choice. I knew I was going to go out through the disability system because I was being retained on active duty as an exception to policy by the Secretary of the Army. My second tour in Vietnam, we better go back a little bit.
Your second tour?
Yeah, I had two tours.
How long were the tours? A year?
Yeah, back to back.
You are an amazing man, sir.
Wait a minute. I still hadn't gotten in a fight because I was on General Abrams' staff, working for basically Bill Colby. So I wanted to get in a fight, so I volunteered to go to a combat unit as regimental commander. And I had a Commander General Staff College buddy up at the headquarters who called me up and he said, "Ed, you don't have a prayer of getting another command over here. You had a command, brigade command." He said, "I'll throw your hat in the ring, but I just want you to know I don't want you to get your nose at a joint if you get turned down." I said, "Okay, I'll take my chances, so throw my hat in the ring." Well, about a week later, I got a phone call. And I could barely make it out. And I said, "Who is this?" He said, "This is John Hill." Well, John Hill was an old friend of mine. We were lieutenant colonels together, and he'd been promoted to brigadier general. And he was commanding a task force up on the DMZ. He had 5 battalions and a ranger company, an engineer company, an aviation company, 5 combat battalions, and a support battalion. He says, "Welcome aboard."
Wow.
Well, I didn't know what he was talking about. He said, "I've had 3 colonels nominated to me to be my deputy commander for combat operations." And he said, "Neither one of them have your background or experience." So I turned them all down. And when your name came up, I approved it. I said, "Good God." I said, "John, I'm going to come up there and spend a couple of weeks with you and get a feel for the situation before I'm assigned up there." I said, "I can arrange that down here." So I did. And I wanted to look at that terrain and see what it was like and see what the troops up there were like, what his equipment was like, what his deadline rate was like, you know, the whole thing.
Yeah, because you've been involved with people who don't know how to fire a gun, and now you want to know. You want to know, right?
Well, this is a different situation from coming in on that boat. So I went up there and, first, after I spent some time up there, I came back and I went back to the States for a month. And then I came back and went up and joined John Hill as his deputy commander for combat operations. And I was there for the rest of my time in Vietnam. And the last thing I did while we were up there, we retook Caisson. Now, Caisson had been retaken a year or two earlier, and it was one hell of a operation. You probably have heard of it. But that involved several Army divisions. But the DMZ, demilitarized zone, had come into play after that. They weren't supposed to come over it, and we weren't supposed to go over it, but you know how it is. They all did.
Yeah. It's like we were never in Cambodia or any place else, right? You know, but we were.
That's right. Yeah. Well, anyway, that was an interesting time up there for the year. So I came back and went to Fort Polk as chief of staff, and then they recalled me to Washington to be deputy director of officer personnel. From there, when my time was up, having that job, I had my pick of the whatever I wanted, wherever I wanted to go, whatever I wanted to do. And I had a couple of years left, and I said, well, I know I'm going out through the disability system, so I want to go over there and to Walter Reed and be president of a disability board. So that's what I did.
Oh.
Then they appointed me deputy commander of the whole system. So then I had 5 boards to worry with. One in Washington, one in Georgia, one in Texas, one in San Francisco, and one in Chicago.
I've never met anybody like you.
So I had to supervise 5 boards, and anytime the president of one of those boards had any personal contact with a person going through the system, he had to disqualify himself if he knew him prior to that time. So I was jumping from one to the other. Every time we'd get one disqualified, I'd have to go be president of his board. So anyway, it was interesting, and I retired from there. And
Yeah, you did how many years did you do?
36
36.
on the rolls of the Army.
Wow. And then,
Then I retired.
that's a long time, yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's more than average.
Yeah, it's more than 2 people's average.
Well, one good thing about it was because I got a battlefield promotion, then I got a promotion below the zone to major, and then I got a promotion below the zone to full colonel. But I was placed in the 48-year group with West Point graduates. Okay?
Yeah, that's what I saw, the 48. And I was
Yeah.
like, yeah.
So I had West Point officers working for me who were still captains in the 45-year group. Lucian Truscott was one of them.
You're an amazing man.
And at that point in time, I was chief of war plans for the 7th U.S. Corps in Germany. And they were still captains, and I was a major and had been for a year.
Let me ask you, when you retired from the service, did you retire, or did you do something else?
No, well, yes, I did something else. When I was in college, my plan was initially to go to work with my father, who was a banker. And after I graduated, I took a look at that situation and I said, I can't live here and go to this place to work until I retire, and I'm 65 years old. I'll be bored to death.
Yeah.
So I had an opportunity to apply for a commission in the regular Army. So I put my name in, and I was commissioned in the regular Army because of my combat service and education and what have you, you know. So I went in as a permanent second lieutenant, but a temporary first lieutenant. So that's how I became a company commander right away. And because all the company commanders were first lieutenants in those days.
Well, sir, you've had one amazing career. I think time-wise, we're kind of running out of time. And I want to thank you for coming. It's been an honor. You know, I mean, I've done about 600 shows. I've only met one other man who was a three-hitter like you. And I made a decision that if any time I have a guy who's 100 years old on my show and who's also career military, I'm going to give him a present. So this is for you, sir. We have these here at the post, at the Erie, and it's for you. And to thank you for your service.
Well, thank you.
United States Army, we got a little straw that goes with it here.
Oh, it's something to drink?
It's, you put your soda or whatever in there, water, you know, and there's a straw that goes there.
Well, I declare.
Yeah.
Well, thank you very much.
Well, hey, listen, 30 some odd years and 3 wars, you deserve something. You know, it's my honor. And we have these here at the Eagles, and I said, I got to buy you one, and that's yours.
Well, thank you. Let me ask you this. I didn't even know the Eagles was here. I've been to Mission Inn many, many times, and I lived over outside of Leesburg for 10 years before I moved to Mount Dora and built a house there. I don't even know what the Eagles are all about.
Well, I just was talking to that lovely young lady over there you call your wife,
Yes,
and I told her, Eagles are people helping people.
I see.
They do a lot of money. They raise a lot of money for all kinds of charities. They are not a veterans organization. Mm-hmm. However, they took me under their wing and said, "Listen, you know, you could come here. This is not an Eagles group thing. But they allow us to come here and put the set here and film because we are a not-for-profit, and they support us." And thanks to their support of the Eagles and letting us put our set here and do our interviews, we can help people. And that's what we try to do with Salute.
Well, that's very kind of you. This is very nice. I appreciate it.
Well, but it's time to say goodbye, sir. But
Well,
you know what? I will see you again because that young lady over there, she wants you to come on the 30th down in Leesburg,
I see.
where they're going to have a celebration, which is kind of a welcome home for Vietnam veterans. And I've already talked to the Daughters of the American Revolution, and they want you there.
Oh, my.
So we're going to say goodbye. And we're going to look at that camera right there, and this is how we do it. To all our veterans out there, our active military and their families, we salute you for all you do. Till next time.
With all your wars and wanting to go, because when did you get married, and what did your wife think about that? Because I know this is your second love, and you were married for many years. What did she think?
Who? Murder?
No, your first wife that passed.
She thought she had a good deal.
And so do you, right?
Well, no, he's stuck with her now because she doesn't go anywhere. So I'm just saying, did you have any kids?
3.
3. Where are they all living?
Well, one was killed. He was a major. The other one lives he's a retired full colonel now.
Oh, so they all joined the military.